We are finished with Act 1, the invasion, on to Act 2, the defense. So, your immune system. You can see a diagram there of the body with some immune structures. The adenoid and the tonsil. Adenoid is really just a pharyngeal tonsil. It's a type of tonsil. The thymus. You didn't even know you had a thymus, did you? Lymph nodes, spleen, bone marrow, lymph vessels. So your lymphatic system is the physical system of your body. The immune system is more of a functional or conceptual system. It uses lots of other systems, including and a lot of your lymphatic system. And then on the far right, you see a bunch of immune cells, things like whatever it says over there, granulocytes, monocytes. CD stands for cluster of differentiation. Those are different cell surface markers that are used to distinguish cells. So the immune system is a collection of organs, cells, and proteins that defends the body against invasion of pathogens. Active against pathogens and cancer. So pathogens are invasions from the outside, cancer is invasion from the inside. You have to be able to fight both. And that's why it's crucial for your immune system to be able to tell the difference from self and non-self. So your immune system doesn't want to attack you. It only wants to attack non-self. And as you probably know, you can probably already think, you've heard of this term, in some cases the immune system malfunctions and starts attacking you. That's what we call an autoimmune disorder. But generally the immune system is good at telling the difference between you and not you. So it only attacks not you. It remembers invaders and responds more quickly if they return. This is the key to what we call immunity. Your immune system, once it fights off bad guys, it remembers who they were. And the next time they try to invade, the immune system responds much more quickly and much more forcefully. It consists of two basic subsystems. Innate immunity is present from birth. Adaptive immunity is trained during childhood. So innate immunity is ready to go. The moment mom squirts you out, it's ready to fight bad guys. Adaptive immunity is not ready to go. It has to undergo extensive training, and that happens during childhood. So have you noticed how little kids, it seems like they've always got a fever, they've always got a runny nose, they're coughing and sneezing and puking, and they've got diarrhea. Yeah, that's normal for little kids. What's happening is they're training their adaptive immune system. They're getting sick with things their immune system is remembering so that they're building immunity to all those things, all right? And it consists of what we call the 3 lines of defense. The first line of defense is the skin and the surface barriers. Second line of defense is internal body defenses, non-specific body defenses, we sometimes say. And the third line of defense consists of T cells, B cells, and antibodies. So let's start looking at your lines of defense. First line of defense, skin and surface barriers. The skin. The skin is more important than you think. What's the best way of keeping people from stealing things inside your house? Yeah, don't let them in. So what's the best way to keep from getting sick with pathogens? Don't let them in. Your skin is what does that. That's why anytime there's a break in the skin, it's potentially serious. Fortunately, it's usually not serious, and that's in large part because of your second line of defense. But why take chances? Breaks in the skin always need to be looked at because potentially that's how bad guys get into your body. So think of the way bad guys get in. Think of the openings to your body. Many of them are lined with mucous membranes. So mucus is basically a sticky trap. When pathogens try to get into your body and there are mucous membranes at the entrances, then the pathogens get stuck. And that's a chance then for immune cells to kill them. So we have what's called MALT, mucus-associated lymphatic tissue. So this is tissue that has mucus, obviously, and lymphatic means there are lymphocytes in there. Lymphocytes, fancy name for some white blood cells. So there are 2 kinds of MALT, BALT and GALT. BALT is bronchial-associated lymphatic tissue, and GALT is gastric or gastrointestinal lymphatic tissue. So you've got the malt brothers, Balt and Galt. Balt, malt, Galt, malt, Balt and Galt, malt, the malt brothers, all right? So think of coughing and sneezing. So when a pathogen tries to get into your body, we hope that, first of all, it will get caught by Balt, the bronchial-associated lymphatic tissue. If it doesn't and it makes it further down into your lungs, then your lungs will try to get it out. And that's what coughing and sneezing are. Did you think it was the virus that makes you cough and sneeze? No, it's your immune system. Think about it. You've got a bad guy getting down into your windpipe and into your lungs. Your immune system says, these bad guys aren't supposed to be here, so what do? You cough and you sneeze to get them out. There you can see a picture of a sneeze. Can you see why a mask might be helpful in preventing the transmission of these pathogens? Emesis and diarrhea. Emesis, fancy name for vomiting. So, your digestive system. Your digestive system, your gastrointestinal tract, is a 30-foot long tube with your mouth on one end and your anus on the other. So you have mucus tissue on both ends. Think about it. Mucus tissue in your mouth and nose, mucus tissue in the rectum. That's where Galt lives. That's Galt. So lymphatic tissues, lymphocytes in the gastrointestinal lymphatic tissues, they're going to try to keep things from getting in. Think about it. Both of those are entryways to your body. So you're going to try to keep things getting in through the mouth and nose, try to keep them getting in through the anus, getting in through the rectum. What happens if they do get in? Well, emesis and diarrhea. Basically, get them out through whichever door is closest. If they're closest to the mouth end, get them out through emesis. If they're closest to the anus end, get them out through diarrhea. That's what your body is doing. It's getting the bad guys out. That piece of pizza that sat on the counter all night long, you thought you would eat it anyway? Yeah, it was covered in bacteria and fungi and parasitic worms and so on. Hopefully, you will catch those with, the Balt and the Galt, the malt brothers. If not, then emesis and diarrhea may be what you need to do. Acidic urine and stomach acid. So think about your urethra is another opening to the outside world. That's the way pathogens can possibly get in. Ladies, always pee after sex, okay? But fortunately, your urine is generally acidic. It can vary, but it's generally acidic. So hopefully, if the bad guys can get in, the acidity of the urine will still get them. And again, if the mucus-associated lymphatic tissue didn't catch the bad guys going down to your stomach, hopefully the stomach acid will kill them. If that doesn't work, well, then you got to get them out through emesis or diarrhea. Look at all the things your body is trying to do to protect you. Trying to keep bad guys out, trying to keep them out in the first place, even if they get in, trying to force them back out again. Tears and cerumen. Tears have things like lysozyme that breaks down bacterial walls. Cerumen just blocks the passage of things trying to get in through your ear. And acidic vaginal secretions. So again, think about it. The vagina is open to the outside world. Therefore, the vagina has acidic secretions to try to keep the bad guys out. That vagina is a pretty damn inhospitable place. Am I right, guys? You know I am. There you see on the far right, if you know South Park, there's little Kenny. Please excuse me from being late. I have explosive diarrhea. Yeah, please, Kenny, stay home. Looks like I forgot to put in pictures of the acidic vaginal secretions. Try to make sure I do that next time. When two people kiss, they create a long tube from butthole to butthole. About 60 feet long, actually. Think about that next time you're feeling romantic. Instead of saying, hey, babe, how about a kiss? Say, hey, babe, how about we create a 60-foot long tube from butthole to butthole? Who knows, might work. Might lead to new things, you never know. All right, second line of defense. What if things make it past the first line of defense? Fortunately, we've got the second line of defense. Let's start with antimicrobial proteins. So here we see interferons. So if you look in the illustration, you see a cell that is being infected by a virus, and then you see that cell is going to start secreting interferons. What do interferons do? Well, look in the bottom illustration. They will activate immune cells. So other immune cells in your body will see the interferons, and they will spring into action. Then look in the middle part of the diagram. If a cell has already been infected by a virus, that cell needs to die, okay? Just like the zombie stuff. If you get bitten by a zombie, you're going to turn into a zombie. Therefore, you have to die. If you're a cell and you've been infected by a virus, you have to die. So what interferons do is they tell that cell to kill itself. Cell suicide. You take one for the team. And that's important. You have to do that. You can't let virus-infected cells live because they are virus factories. And then up at the top part of the illustration, notice it signals nearby non-infected cells to start defending themselves, making antiviral proteins, reducing protein synthesis in general, but carrying out various activities to try to resist the virus. So secreted by cells infected by viruses, warn nearby cells to secrete antiviral substances and to undergo apoptosis if they're in fact infected. Gunga Din, you may know, Rudyard Kipling, great poem. Try to have a little bit of culture in my college classes. Great poem, great movie. Cary Grant, Victor McLaughlin, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Most of my students never heard of Gunga Din or Rudyard Kipling, but then I say Jungle Book and they go, oh yeah. Thank goodness for Disney, huh? Gunga Din, if you know the poem, it was about a British servant, a servant of British soldiers who was horribly mistreated. But at one point, the British soldiers are about to march into a trap, and Gunga Din climbs up on top of the temple or whatever, and he blows the bugle, and that warns the British soldiers. But of course, Gunga Din is killed. In the final line of the poem, "You're a better man than I am, Gunga Din." Gunga Din sacrificed himself to save the British, in spite of the fact that they had horribly mistreated him. But that's basically what has to happen if a cell is infected by a virus. It has to sacrifice itself to help save your body. Okay, complement proteins. So complement proteins are a collection of more than 30 proteins and protein fragments that are active right now. Well, they're not active right now. They're present in your blood right now. They're there, but they're in an inactive form. They will get activated. We talk about fixing complement. There are various pathways, the classical pathway, the lectin pathway. No time for all that. But basically, when you're invaded, when there's some kind of damage to your body, complement becomes activated. These proteins spring into action. What do? Well, they produce inflammation, for one thing. Now, inflammation seems to become a dirty word, but inflammation controlled is a good thing. It brings more fighters to the area, helps clear away bad guys as well. Complement proteins can also bind together and punch holes in pathogen cell membranes. So in that illustration on the lower left, you see the complement proteins. They're the ones that are kind of I don't know, maybe is that a cinnamon color? I'm still working on my color terms. But they literally punch a hole in the cell membrane and that kills the cell. Is that cool or what? And they also coat pathogens with substances that make them tastier to white blood cells. So white blood cells will eat bad guys, phagocytosis, all right? But sometimes they might not notice a bad guy. They might be wandering by, and they don't even notice a bad guy. Well, complement proteins coat them with something tasty, like maybe tapatio, all right? So complement proteins sprinkle tapatio on the bad guys, and then the white blood cells will go, hey, I think I smell tapatio. And then they'll look around and they'll notice there's a bad guy with tapatio, and they'll eat it. Don't you love tapatio? It makes everything taste better. I actually prefer Cholula, but I like tapatio too. Okay, second line of defense continuing, fever and inflammation. So fever. Fever intensifies the effects of interferons, helps them work better and faster, also increases the activity of white blood cells. So fever, we're all such wusses. Whenever we get a fever, we run for the Tylenol. Fact is, low-grade fevers are good for you. They're beneficial for the body. Most of my former students who are now doctors and nurses and stuff in the hospitals, in general, they say that they let fevers run. If they're under 102, let them run. They're actually helping you fight the bad guys. I mean, you always have to figure out, what is the cause of the fever and so on. But in general, fever is a generalized state of response to disease, and in general, it helps. It helps you be more effective in fighting the bad guys. And inflammation, again, seems to be a dirty word, but it's a common response to most disease states. It helps bring white blood cells and nutrients to the site of the infection. All right. Inflammation is caused by release of histamine. It vasodilates blood vessels. When the blood vessels vasodilate, then more white blood cells and nutrients can get to the site of the infection. That's generally a good thing as long as it stays under control. Helps dispose of pathogens, dead cells, and cellular debris. All right. Generally beneficial as long as it's not out of control. And there you see the 5 cardinal signs of inflammation. Back when I was a student long ago, we only talked about the 4 cardinal signs. The loss of function, the last one was added later. But every medical student knows, going from left to right, you have dolor, calor, rubor, and tumor. Old Latin root words, damn Romans, for pain, heat, redness, swelling. Those will always accompany inflammation. But again, they're generally tolerable, and inflammation is doing a good thing for you. It's helping you fight the bad guys. Having talked about the complement proteins and about the nonspecific responses of fever and inflammation, let's move on to the antimicrobial cells, the actual killers. So here you see white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, leuco-white site cell. White blood cells specialize in killing pathogens. So there on the bottom left is a monocyte. Above it to the right would be a lymphocyte. The little smiley face is a neutrophil. See a basophil over there on the bottom right. There are 5 kinds of white blood cells. Each has its own specialty. It has its own, it's trained to do, it knows how to do a specific job. So first, neutrophils. Neutrophils often look like smiley faces. They specialize in killing bacteria. They release bleach, hydrogen peroxide, free radicals. They also eat them, so they're macrophages, we say. Eosinophils. These specialize in killing parasites that are too large to be eaten. So there you see a parasitic worm that's being swarmed by eosinophils. Eosinophils are the little dark dots. They release hydrogen peroxide and free radicals. They all actually have neurotoxins to kill those big parasites. So 2 types of white blood cells, neutrophils and eosinophils. There are others as well. So basophils. They release histamine, which promotes inflammation, and they also release heparin. So again, inflammation seems to be a bad word these days, but it's a normal response to lots of disease states. It helps bring more white blood cells to the area. It vasodilates, makes blood vessels larger in diameter. Then you get more nutrients and more fighters, more white blood cells to fight the bad guys. Nutrients to give them the energy they need and to repair tissues and things. Problem is, when you bring a lot of blood to the area, it might clot, so they also release heparin, an anticoagulant, a so-called blood thinner, in order to try to keep you from clotting while you're fighting the bad guys. Then, monocytes or macrophages. Monocytes are the white blood cells that when they leave the blood, they turn into macrophages. And macrophages are huge. Macrophage, the big eaters. So the other white blood cells we've seen so far are microphages. These are macrophages. They can eat tons of bad guys, pathogens. They are a terror to pathogens. Devour large numbers of them. You have fixed macrophages that reside in places like your lungs and intestines and lymph nodes. Makes sense, doesn't it? You know, if bad guys are coming in through your nose and mouth, if one of the Malt brothers can't get them, then when they make it down to the bottom of your lung, there are fixed macrophages waiting for them, waiting to kill them, and they wipe them out. Same thing, intestines. If it gets past the Malt brothers, gets past your stomach acid, by God, you got fixed macrophages waiting for the bad guys in your intestines. And the lymph nodes found all throughout your body, they filter lymph, a clear fluid, but there could be bad guys in the lymph, and so the lymph nodes are full of macrophages that eat the bad guys. There are also wandering macrophages. They simply wander around through your body looking for trouble. So there you go, looking for trouble. Look no further. And then, finally, natural killer cells. Don't you wish your name was Natural Killer? When they said to you, state your name, last name first, you would go Killer. Natural. That illustration is from a movie called Natural Born Killers, Oliver Stone movie. It was very violent. Some people didn't like it because it was so violent, but Woody Harrelson, Juliette Lewis, great performances, and really a very funny movie, if you can get past the violence. So natural killer cells are a type of lymphocyte, which is the 5th kind of white blood cell. Neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, monocytes, now lymphocytes. Natural killer cells kill pathogens that have been tagged by antibodies. So remember I said that antibodies don't actually kill bad guys, they just handcuff them. So what we see now, here is a cancer cell. Notice it has an antigen on it, and there's an antibody that's handcuffed it. Well, the natural killer cell comes along, and it can recognize the antibody, and then it kills whatever is attached to the antibody. Is that awesome or what? So here you can see it's releasing perforins and granzymes. Perforins perforate or penetrate the cell wall, and then granzymes introduce that cell suicide, the seppuku, the apoptosis. They cause the cell to kill itself. And here we see at the macrophage restaurant. My wife will have the lice, streptococci, and plasma sauce, and I'll have the cellular debris. Dressing on that, pus. And then later, darling, you have some DNA stuck between your teeth. Thanks, dear. And here you go. There are a couple of wandering macrophages right there, looking for trouble. Those are actually my friends Fanny Galore and Ida Tapper. They're burlesque dancers. Tucson had a thriving burlesque community before the pandemic. I hope it survives and comes back after the pandemic is under control. Those, by the way, are two amazing, smart, talented ladies. They just enjoy taking their clothes off in front of an audience. There's no actual nudity in burlesque, by the way. Okay, those were the first two lines of defense. Time to get to the big dog on the block. The third line of defense, adaptive immunity. So the first and second lines of defense are innate. Remember, they were ready to go the moment mom squirted you out. They were ready to go, ready to fight bad guys right away. Those are the troops. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. Those are the ones that are out there fighting the battles for you, all right? We've seen them, first and second lines already. They were ready to go when you were born. They act instantly the moment a pathogen gets in, and their response is always the same, and they fight any pathogen, all right? Now, the third line of defense is adaptive. Remember, this is the one that has to be trained. This is why little kids are always puking and have runny noses and fevers and so on. They're training their adaptive immune systems during childhood. These, by the way, are the elite forces. These are the Navy SEALs, the Green Berets, Delta Force, the Special Ops. These are truly lethal forces, all right? They require special training during childhood, like we've said. It takes time to mobilize on the first exposure, but they respond quickly and forcefully on subsequent exposure. So think of it. Like as a little kid, I had the mumps. People don't get that anymore because now they have a vaccine for it. But it used to be that when you would get the mumps the first time, you were sick with it for like a week. But it's not like after you recovered. It's not as though the mumps virus went away out there in nature. It was still there. What happened was, after you recovered from the mumps still tried to get into your body on numerous subsequent occasions. But your adaptive defense, it wiped it out the moment it got in, all right? That's the key to the adaptive defense. It remembers pathogens it has encountered before, and therefore it confers what we call immunity. When we say that you're immune to something, we mean that your adaptive, the third line of defense, has fought it off, and it remembers it, all right? So again, in the diagram, you see innate defenses up on the top, surface, internal defenses. Look at the adaptive defenses. They depend on B cells and T cells and antibodies, and we're going to be talking about all those coming up. Here's the best way to strengthen your child's immune system. That's what little kids are supposed to look like. They're supposed to be out there in the muck and the guck and the goo and the grime and the slime. You don't want them playing in raw sewage and inhaling paint thinner and stuff like that. But it's perfectly fine, not just perfectly fine, it's actually good for your kids to get out there and get dirty. You want your little kids to encounter all the gunk out there in the world. That's how they get immune to it. It really distresses me. I see these ads on TV. Little kids are playing, one of them sneezes, and the mom runs for the Lysol or the Clorox wipes and wipes down the toys, wipes down the furniture, wipes down the kids. That's not a good thing. Those ads are actually preying upon women who have obsessive-compulsive disorder. There are actually studies. There's actually data on this. Kids who are overprotected are the ones more likely to have allergies and asthma and things like that. Little kids need to get out there in the world and get dirty. That's how they train their immune systems. This is a healthy young kid. Okay, components of adaptive immunity. The innate and adaptive immune systems work together. It's not as though, don't think as though the first line of defense goes first, and the second line goes second, and third line goes third. No, they all can work simultaneously, all right? They all work together. Both involve white blood cells and plasma proteins. So we see these nice overlapping circles. Look at the circle on the left. A lot of the things in there we've talked about. Look, macrophages, natural killer cells, complement proteins, neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. Haven't talked about dendritic cells yet, but we're going to. That's going to come next. Mast cells are basically like basophils, essentially the same thing. The adaptive immune system depends on APCs and lymphocytes. So over on the right, you look at that circle, you see it has B cells and T cells and antibodies, all right? APCs we don't know yet, but we're going to talk about that now. Antigen-presenting cells, APCs for short, those are dendritic cells and others that devour pathogens and display them to antigens. So now we've completed the picture here. There's the dendritic cell up in the top. In the overlap there it says a gamma delta T cell, natural killer T cell. Those are types of T cells which we'll be talking about, all right? Well, not specifically. We'll be talking about the T cells. So dendritic cells, yeah, they eat the bad guys and then they show the bad guys to lymphocytes. Then T lymphocytes. I always tell my college students, you can call them T cells. That's their nickname. That's their abbreviated version. But remember that they're actually lymphocytes. Lymphocyte is a type of white blood cell. I don't like T cell because you might forget that it's actually a white blood cell. T lymphocyte is really a better name. T lymphocytes activate the immune system and they kill infected cells. Then B lymphocytes, which again, shorthand term, B cells, better to say B lymphocytes really. They devour pathogens and they're the ones who make antibodies. So that's what you're seeing on the right-hand circle there, all right? So we've set up all the components. Let's look at how it actually works. Here we go. The immune system, adaptive immunity, the epic novel. So first, an APC ingests an antigen, then it displays it to a type of T cell called a helper T cell. All right, so look in the illustration, there's the APC. It's eating the antigen, and then it's actually displaying the epitopes on its major histocompatibility complex type 2 protein to a CD4 cell, and CD4 cells we call helper T cells. There is the helper T cell. So again, the APC eats the antigen and displays part of it to the helper T cell. The helper T cell now activates the entire adaptive immune response. Helper T cells are at the core of your immune system. They are essential to adaptive immunity. You can't have adaptive immunity without helper T cells. So what do? Well, first what's called clonal selection. So they cause some T cells and B cells, remember actually T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes, to clone into what are called memory T cells and memory B cells. And the illustration shows memory T cells. There are memory B cells as well. Those are the ones that remember that you've been invaded. They don't forget, just like some of your ex-girlfriends and boyfriends probably. Then it causes other B cells to clone into what are called plasma cells, and they're the ones that make the antibodies. So here in the illustration it doesn't say plasma cell, but typically when a B cell clones into the type of cell that makes the antibodies, we now call it a plasma cell. So it's making antibodies, all right? Remember, those are going to go out and handcuff bad guys in your body. It's going to cause other T cells to clone into killer T cells. Remember before we had natural killer cells? Killer T cells are very similar. They are going to kill infected cells of your body. Remember, once a cell in your body is infected, can't trust it. Once you're bitten by a zombie, you have to die. A killer T cell will kill you. And then also, the helper T cell will activate other white blood cells to multiply. So, in other words, all the neutrophils and the macrophages and the basophils and the eosinophils, they are increasingly activated by the helper T cell. It causes them to become even more active than they already were. So, how does the helper T cell do this? How do all the T cells talk to each other? They communicate using small proteins called cytokines, which we've already seen some of before. Interferons are cytokines. Interleukins, look at the word interleukin. Inter means between, leukin, leukocyte. So these are proteins that communicate between leukocytes. They're like text messages. This is how white blood cells text each other. They use cytokines. There are also tumor necrosis factors that specialize in cancer cells, okay? So this is how the adaptive immunity works. Look at all the components. That's what has to take place. And if that takes place, you should be able to overcome the infection using the killer T cells and the B cells and the antibodies, and you'll remember it with those memory T cells and memory B cells. And those are the cytokines right there. The essence of communication, the text messages. Here we go. True crime stories. Oh my gosh, a virus has infected a cell. Oh no! A helper T cell calls for help. Help! Help! Oh, thank goodness. Here comes the killer T cell. It's going to take care of the problem. Wait, what? What just happened here? Once a body cell is infected, it's no longer part of us. It has to die. So the killer T cell kills the infected cell. It's got to die. It has to be killed by a killer T cell. Now, what this cartoon leaves out, which potentially makes it more confusing, is that the virus also has to die. But it's not the killer T cell that kills the virus. The virus will be killed by an APC, by a B cell, by a natural killer cell, once it's been tagged by an antibody. Okay, so do you get it? I use this in my college classes to make sure people understand what it is that the different immune cells do. Killer T cells kill infected cells of your own body. There are other cells that will kill the virus. Both have to die. The virus has to die. Well, of course, remember, viruses aren't actually living. Virus has to be gobbled up and incapacitated, and then the infected cell has to die. So think about it. What if there were a pathogen that could infect helper T cells? Remember, helper T cells were at the center of the adaptive immune system. They're the ones that caused the formation of the memory cells. They activated the B cells to turn into plasma cells. They activated other immune cells. They caused T cells to turn into killer T cells. What if there were no helper T cells? Oh my God. What if there were a pathogen that could do that? If it could infect helper T cells? Is there such a thing? Yes, there is. It's HIV. There you see, it invades the T cell, the helper T cell. HIV invades helper T cells, thereby disabling the entire adaptive immune system. Can you see why HIV is such a disease of interest, why there's so much research on it? It doesn't attack liver cells or brain cells or respiratory cells. It attacks the immune system itself and disables your adaptive immune system. That's, by the way, why it's so hard to come up with a vaccine. In order to have a vaccine, you have to have a functioning adaptive immune system. Since HIV disables the adaptive immune system, you don't really have a way to make a vaccine for it. So take a look here. What's going to happen? HIV going to inactivate the helper T cell, therefore no memory cells, therefore no clonal selection, no B cells, no antibodies, no killer T cells, no activation of neutrophils and macrophages. Yeah, that's HIV. Completely disables adaptive immunity. Now, I have greatly oversimplified all of this. Look at that illustration on the left. Upper left corner, you see the APC. Upper right corner, there's the CD4, that's the helper T cell. Lower right corner, you see a memory T cell. Lower left corner, an effector T cell, that's a killer T cell. And then look at all the things, look at all the little arrows. IL-15, interleukin 15, interleukin 7, interleukin 10, interleukin 21. You see some IFNs there. Those are interferons. Look at all the things that have to go on. Look at all the communication going on. And then you can see the illustration on the right, on the bottom, a T cell. and it's talking to either a tumor cell, professional APC, or a target cell. You see antibodies floating around out there. Look at all the different kinds of cytokines. Look at all the different kinds of receptors that are going on. There are only a handful of people on the planet, relatively speaking, who understand this. These are the scientists. These are the ones working in the laboratories. These are the ones that when the SARS-CoV-2 virus was first identified back in January of last year, January of 2020, these are the people who went to work, and they started figuring this out so that they could figure out how to make a vaccine for it. Thousands of scientists all over the world, in countries everywhere, in South Korea, in Finland, in Australia, in Brazil, in the United States, in Germany, everywhere, in China as well. They were all working 40, 60-hour weeks trying to figure out, wearing gloves and goggles and micropipetting and using PCR machines. They're the ones who figured out how to beat this virus. And they are the ones, I'm glad that governments all over the world funded the research. That was great of them to do so. And that certainly helps with getting the vaccine made and funding it so that people don't have to pay to get vaccinated. But the people who actually figured out how to do this are the scientists. And there should be several thousand medals of freedom awarded to all the people who figured this out. Because I'll tell you for sure, politicians did not figure out how to do this.